Part 30. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 291. Above the ruins of the base, armed helicopters, fighter jets and transport planes fly over from time to time. The huge hole in the entire base has been surrounded by layers of walls, barbed wire, and isolation belts. Countless heavily armed soldiers, dragon bird guards in uniforms, and researchers in biochemical suits have spread throughout the base. With the arrival of Li Anping's body, countless men belonging to Daxia have taken over the ruins of the entire base. All kinds of materials, and data in computers are constantly being unearthed. In fact, this time the operation was originally for Lu Feng to pretend to be Peter Parker, while Li Anping's mind energy was possessed by Lu Feng, and Lu Feng himself was monitored by Li Qian's ability. In this way, as long as the mastermind behind the scenes takes Lu Feng, the incarnation of Nian Qi can ensure that Lu Feng is safe and sound, and Li Qian's ability can also help Daxia Longke find the opponent's location. Unfortunately, what Lu Feng was brought into was not the opponent's main base, and the so-called God King did not appear in person. But even so, the level of technology contained in this base is enough for Daxia Longke to gain a lot. Seeing the expert operating the blackened computer in front of him, the doctor looked both happy and distressed. Fortunately, the technological level displayed by the other party is at least 50 to 100 years ahead of Daxia. What is distressing is that most of the base was destroyed by Li Anping's punch. Even with the ability of experts to control computers, less than 1/3 of the data was rescued. But what the doctor cares about is different. Lu Feng on the side compares it. More concerned about the other party's intelligence. What about experts? Can you find out the locations of their other bases? The expert shook his head and slowly withdrew the thought energy on his fingers from the opponent's computer. They are all research machines. Their internal network is broken. To find the core information, I must find the server where they build the data warehouse. Lu Feng sighed and looked up at the large ruins around him. It's really hard to give an expectation as to how much information I can find. Not to mention that experts and doctors continued to collect information here. Lu Feng walked towards the inside of a transport aircraft. There are several computers and 2 large display screens in the transport cabin, and many staff are busy working non-stop. It is the temporary command center of Daxia Longke here. Li Anping sat in front of the screen. I kept clicking and drawing, and listed one list after another, showing the harvest of Daxia Longke this time. Although a lot of things were lost due to his attack, once all the information and materials collected by Daxia Longke were digested, it would be enough to improve Daxia's technological level by more than 15 years. Just then, there was a flash on the display screen. Prompts that there is a communication request. Sir, there is an unknown communication request. We haven't found out where it comes from. Do you want to answer it? Li Anping said calmly, take it. I saw a flash on the big screen, and the upper body of the God King appeared in front of Li Anping. Seeing the leisurely Li Anping in front of him, the God King gritted his teeth and said, Li Anping. God King? Or Dabda, Li Anping said casually. Don't call me that name, the God King said disdainfully, that name has nothing to do with me. He looked at Li Anping and said coldly, Li Anping. And Daxia Longke, I'll count on you to be cruel this time. But you guys destroy one of my sub-bases, don't think it'll be over that easily. Let me ask you, is Christine in your hands? Li Anping nodded, yes, I'll let you meet me. After a few minutes. Under the escort of several dragon bird guards, a pale-faced Christine was escorted in front of Li Anping. Christine burst into tears when she saw the God King on the screen. Master. Seeing Christine looking like she was about to cry, the God King was already furious, but when he found Christine's empty sleeves, he was even more livid. He said word by word, Christine, where is your right hand? Did Li Anping do anything to you? Before Christine could speak, Li Anping had already waved his hand and had Christine escorted back again. Looking at the furious God King, Li Anping said calmly, "Dabda, right? This subordinate of yours doesn't know the rules of being a prisoner, so I took off one of her hands. I said, my name is not Dabda, my name is God King." God King's eyes were filled with bloodshot eyes, and he roared like a furious monster, "Li Anping, Christine is my woman, if you dare touch her again and I will make you regret living in this world." "Oh? You care about her very much," Li Anping smiled, "that's best. If you don't want anything to happen to her, just hand over Tian Haoan. As for the matter of the 8th Research Institute, it's best to keep it rotten in your stomach for the rest of your life." The God King was so angry that he trembled all over. Since he came to this world, he had never been bullied like this before. It was a shame and humiliation. Looking at the indifferent Li Anping in front of him, the God King turned off the communication directly. "Ah!" With a roar, the God King punched the console in front of him, directly smashing the console into a huge dent and sending out balls of electric sparks. "Trash! Li Anping, you trash! I'm going to kill you." While roaring, the God King drew out the lightsaber from his waist and slashed the console in front of him into pieces with a few slashes. Beside him, a young woman dressed as a maid was looking at the God King in front of her with fear. In her memory, no matter what kind of situation he encountered, the man in front of her always looked confident and had everything under control. In fact, up to now, with the endless high technology, the God King has never failed. This is the first time the girl has seen the God King so furious. The only similar time was last year, when a prince in Dallas flirted with Xiao'er. As a result, the prince was assassinated by the God King the next day. Before he died, his lower body was cut off and he suffered all kinds of cruel torture. But compared to this time, the God King's anger was more than 100 times stronger. Just when the woman was thinking about this, she suddenly heard the God King say coldly, "Dong-er." I saw that the God King at this time, although his eyes were still full of bloodshot, the rage had gradually subsided, and the only thing left was a bleak killing. "Master," a woman named Dong-er, dressed like a maid, bowed and said. "Go and bring Tian Haoan here." After a pause, the God King continued, "Take T-1000 with you. If he doesn't want to come, just catch him." Dong-er hesitated and said, "Master, are we going to hand him over to Li Anping?" The God King snorted coldly, "Just go when I tell you to go." "What nonsense! Christine is my woman. I will never let anyone hurt her." Dong-er nodded and wanted to say something, but seeing the God King's cold eyes, she bowed and retreated. Only the God King was left in the room. He quietly looked at the big screen, which showed the last image left by Li Anping when he communicated before. Looking at Li Anping in the image, a trace of viciousness flashed in the God King's eyes. Women, this is the biggest reverse scale in the God King's heart. Anyone who touches his woman must die. Even if you want to, you can't think about it. This woman covers a wide range, including all those who are related to the God King, those whom the God King likes, and even appreciates. And Christine is one of the women that the God King particularly favors during this period, so he lets her preside over the disciplinary base. This is also a habit of the God King, handing over part of his foundation to the woman he favors to manage. But now Li Anping not only caught Christine, but also broke one of Christine's hands. How can the God King not be furious and crazy? Just a native. The God King gritted his teeth and said, "Now let you be arrogant for a while, and when I exchange the mothership, the Death Star, and the Gulangziu, I want the entire Daxia dragon bird to be buried with you." Thinking that the natives who were originally waiting to be surpassed and trampled in his eyes were now bullying him, the God King became more and more angry. But what he didn't know was that he planned to show mercy and let others go temporarily, but others didn't plan to let him go easily. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lang Go. Chapter 292. Daxia Longke Base, Training Room. The palm of Li Anping's right hand was pressing against a huge steel column. The steel column was more than 50 meters in diameter and led directly to the ceiling. Li Anping has used similar equipment to exercise his body in the past. Through mechanical devices on the ceiling, the steel columns are powerful enough to generate hundreds of tons of force downwards. But as time goes by and Li Anping improves, the equipment of the past was no longer enough for Li Anping. So he had someone rebuild one at Daxia Longke's base and improve its performance so that he could produce stronger power. For Daxia's modern mechanical technology, although such a thing that purely requires weight and strength has never been encountered, it is not difficult to solve. What's more, this was Li Anping's request, so it was immediately given top priority and was quickly created. Li Anping was seen holding the steel pillar with one hand, and his whole body was standing under the steel pillar, like an ant that was about to be crushed to death at any time. But as Li Anping held his hand like this, the steel column, which weighed more than 1,000 tons, remained motionless and showed no tendency to fall. At Li Anping's feet, if you observe carefully, you will find that the soles of his feet are always about an inch away from the ground. This is Li Anping using the void field to move his body. Otherwise, if such a huge force pressed down on Li Anping's body along the steel pillar, and then transferred to the ground through Li Anping's feet, the terrible pressure would probably pierce the entire ground in an instant. Feeling the weight in his hands, Li Anping said to the microphone in the room with some dissatisfaction, "Is this already the highest power?" A voice came from the radio, and a man said with some trembling, "Gravity plus the vertical downward force of the machine has reached 100,000 tons. This is the limit of the machine." "Is that so?" Li Anping showed a hint of disappointment in his heart. "I saw that the palm of his hand that was pressing against the steel pillar suddenly exerted force, and the palm of his hand was now pressing with 5 fingers. Then it quickly became 4 fingers, then 3 fingers, until 1 finger. Because of the virtual force field, no matter how many fingers there are, the force-bearing area of the steel column will not change. The only thing that changes, the part where Li Anping received the force, changed from the entire palm to an index finger. But even so, with one index finger holding 100,000 tons of force, Li Anping still didn't feel like he had reached his limit. Even when he changed his palms, the entire steel column did not rise and fall at all. This means that Li Anping has spared no effort and weight in front of him from beginning to end. It's no different than a toy to him." While Li Anping was exercising, the electronic door on the side of the room slowly opened and Yan Bei walked in. Looking at the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. He knew deeply what kind of power Li Anping was bearing now. He felt that he was becoming more and more obedient to Li Anping, but there was nothing he could do about it. If Yan Bei had just escaped from the predicament, his heart was still as high as the sky. If he thought that one day he could surpass Li Anping and become a guest, he would have already hidden this idea deep in his heart somewhere where he could not find it. Not to mention that he thought it was impossible for him to defeat Li Anping. He even had doubts about whether there were any creatures in the world that could compete with Li Anping. He looked at Li Anping, who was playing with the steel pillars. Yan Bei bowed and reported that Christine has already explained everything. She is only a second-level ability user, and her mental will is not very strong. She was easily hypnotized by our ability user. Then everything was explained. Listening to Yan Bei's words, Li Anping did not stop exercising. He flexed his fingers. Lifting and lowering the steel pillar, he asked casually, "Do you know where the God King is?" Looking at the solid steel column with a diameter of 50 meters, which was making waves of shenayan under Li Anping's manipulation, Yan Bei swallowed his saliva and continued, "I'm not sure about the position of the God King yet. This woman was originally just a movie star with the ability to charm ordinary people. She has known the God King for about half a year and also knows the locations of the 2 bases. But it is still unclear whether those 2 bases are the main bases of the God King, and whether the God King will be there. Li Anping nodded and controlled the position of the steel pillar with a virtual force field. Slowly walked out from under the steel pillar. 2 bases, then let me and my clone take charge of one each, and you send troops to follow. This time I will try to leave a complete base for you. Yanbei was worried, but the God King still has the evidence of the 8th Research Institute in his hands. If we act rashly. Slowly lowering the steel column to the ground, a dull sound came from between the steel column and the ground. However, because of Li Anping's support, the ground only vibrated very slightly. He said coldly, then let's deal with the 8th Research Institute and follow the plan. Yanbei's eyes widened and he asked doubtfully, isn't it too early? After all, the news has not been leaked yet. If such a direct transfer is made, I am afraid it will cause a very large adverse impact in the country. Li Anping looked at Yanbei and said, it is impossible for me to compromise with the God King. I want to keep Peter Parker, I want to capture Tianhaoan, and I also want to accept all the high-tech gadgets of the God King. As for the 8th Research Institute, since it has been exposed, I will deal with it myself and then build a new one. Tell Shi Wen and the doctor to start directly. Clear. Yanbei nodded and slowly retreated. The eastern continent, the western sea, and the location close to the 5-star ocean. A fishing boat is sailing on the sea. The sun is shining high, the sea breeze is blowing, and the sea at this moment reveals its gentle side. James, the captain of this small fishing boat, moved a deck chair and placed it on the deck, enjoying the rare leisure time. Unfortunately, the calm did not last long. In this peaceful atmosphere, a fierce undercurrent was erupting under the sea. The entire fishing boat began to shake violently. As the captain, James felt something was wrong and immediately got up. What's going on? There's something under the sea. He's coming up. I saw that the entire sea surface was slowly rising due to a huge force. The crew quickly pulled up the sail, turned the rudder, started the fishing boat's motor, and ducked to the side. After finally escaping the sudden rise of the waves, the crew members became stunned, because at their previous location, a giant creature they had never seen before was slowly rising from the sea. The whole body is wrapped in a golden unknown metal, with a shuttle-shaped shape, and the armor is inlaid with countless crystal arrays. A layer of blue plasma shield that was difficult to discern with the naked eye kept flashing around him, pushing away the surrounding seawater. The spaceship, which was 1.5 kilometers long, lifted off from the bottom of the sea and flew slowly towards the sky. A huge shadow covered the surrounding sea. The crew members on the small fishing boat all looked at the shadow in the sky stupidly. The water that had not been pushed away in time fell from the plasma shield and returned to the sea. It seemed that it was like a light rain. In the control room of the spacecraft are countless robots with metal skeletons. The God King sat in the captain's seat, and a girl with short red hair, like a personal maid, stood behind him. She is Xia, another personal maid of the God King. Captain, we found civilians on the sea below the hull. It's Icebug's fishing boat. The God King looked at the fishing boats on the screen coldly and said casually, sink them. As you command, sir. A car-sized interceptor flew out from inside the spacecraft. When he passed over the fishing boat, 2 blue beams of light directly turned the fishing boat into a pile of burning steel. Then the spacecraft quickly rose and flew towards the target location. Xia asked in confusion, Master, why do you want to give up the undersea base? We have been developing this base for more than a year. It would be a shame to give up now. The God King looked at the aircraft carrier breaking through the sea of clouds, and said with hatred on his face, Kristen may not betray me, but there are too many ability users in Daxia Lonke, as well as the Wang family. Their ability is hypnosis. Kristen only has the 3rd ability. The 2nd level is likely to expose the location of the base. We hold the evidence from the 8th Research Institute in our hands. Li Anping will definitely not dare to break up with us directly, but monitoring and investigation are indispensable. I don't want all the power in my hands to be exposed to Li Enping. Moreover, I spent so much effort to redeem this aircraft carrier just because I was afraid of something unexpected. Glancing at the pretty and charming Xiao'er, the God King's eyes flashed with desire again. He grabbed Xiao'er's chin and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I took away all the important things in the base. With so many robots at my disposal, it couldn't be easier to build a base, but this time I plan to build it on Tyrell's side." Thinking of this, a cold light flashed through the eyes of the God King again. "Humph, there are many people in the Western continent who want to deal with Li Enping. I just need to add fuel to the flames, and I can wait for them both to lose. During this time, I have been working hard to develop. When I exchange for something more powerful, I will not be afraid of Li Enping. Master, you are so powerful." Xiao'er's chin was held up by the God King, a trace of blush appeared on her face, and she said softly, "But what about Sister Christine? Didn't Sister Dong'er go to arrest Tian Haoan? Of course, after I change back to Christine, we will go to the Western continent together." Looking at the seductive look on Xiao'er's face, the God King couldn't help but pout, and slowly kissed her on the cheek. But just when his lips were about to touch the other person's cheek, an emergency message was suddenly received on the aircraft carrier. The God King hurriedly looked at the screen. It turned out that another base was under unknown attack during the retreat. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 293. In modern society, with advanced technology, there are eyes everywhere in the sky. No matter how uninhabited a place is on land, it will be exposed to the eyes of the world one day. So in order to hide the power of his development and accumulate strength in secret, the other two bases of the God King were built very secretly. One is located on the seabed, and the other is built underground, under a snowy mountain in the ice castle of the East continent. Because the incarnation of mind energy can be virtual or real, it is not affected by air resistance, and its mass can be ignored, so he flies much faster than Li Enping. When Li Enping made the decision to uproot the two bases of the God King, the incarnation of mind energy had arrived at the location of the snow mountain base 2 hours ahead of the main body. Standing in a forest, in front of the incarnation of mind energy is a huge rock wall. But he knew that this was just a disguise. When necessary, this rock wall can be opened directly, which is one of the main entrances and exits of the base. Li Enping did not break the door and rush in immediately. He used the mind energy in his body to scan the situation of the base constantly. Countless robots, automated weapons, computers, lathes, and unknown huge weapons, one by one, attracted his eyes. But he just kept waiting and didn't make a move immediately. And because the spirit energy can't be observed by ordinary people and cameras, he just stood here, and no one could find him from beginning to end. Until everything was ready. The body of the spirit energy incarnation suddenly shook, and the surging spirit energy rushed up from him like a blazing flame. The next moment, he took a step forward, his body turned from virtual to real, snowflakes rushed into the sky, and rolled up a straight air wave at an astonishing speed. Li Enping's clone had already crashed into the rock wall. With a loud bang, a big hole was directly knocked out of the rock wall, which could not stop Li Enping's advance at all. Li Enping broke into the base like this, and saw metal corridors and walls everywhere. A few seconds after he broke in, the entire base had sounded the alarm, and the flashing red lights illuminated the entire corridor. Rows of robots with metal skeletons rushed out first, their right hands were all gun barrels flashing blue light. Unfortunately, before they could get close to Li Enping, they were already knocked out by the overwhelming punch, and their bodies completely disintegrated in mid-air, turning into countless parts. In fact, even if Li Enping did not take action, These robots that rely on cameras, infrared rays, and thermal sensing to observe the world would never be able to detect the existence of the mind incarnation, but Li Enping's purpose of coming here was to completely destroy all the armed forces of the entire base, so that Daxia Longke could take over. The black mind incarnation slowly moved along the corridor, and wherever he passed, whether it was various robots or automated weapons, he easily destroyed them all. For Li Enping, the only thing to pay attention to is not to use too much force, otherwise he would accidentally destroy the entire base. On the aircraft carrier on the other side, the God King's hands kept sweeping across the console quickly, and his eyes were fixed on the screen, and drops of cold sweat left on his forehead from time to time. Damn it! What on earth is that? What is attacking my base? The screen jumped, and a surveillance camera popped up. It was a corridor, and more than a dozen war robots more than 2 meters tall with tracks on their lower bodies were moving quickly towards the attack position of the base. The robots were equipped with rockets, automatic artillery, and even laser weapons. Such a combat unit, if it went to the battlefield, would be enough to defeat thousands of people head-on. But now on the screen, these killing machines were like toys, directly blown into the air, and torn apart by an invisible force. Crushed and squeezed. From beginning to end, the God King who was observing through the camera could not even see what destroyed these robots. The combat unit worth tens of millions was scrapped in an instant. The God King couldn't help but curse, and then shouted directly, "Red Queen, close all the passages of the Snow Mountain base, and the core team will evacuate according to the original plan. Don't engage in fire with the other side for the time being." A girl's voice came from the computer, "Yes, my master. This is a highly intelligent program called Red Queen. The God King spent a huge price to exchange her out to manage all his units and bases. But he also has a goal, which is to help Red Queen build a perfect body one day and include her in his harem. As for the current Red Queen, her body is placed on an aircraft carrier, and through the satellite launched by the God King himself, it can connect and control all his mechanical units. So in the eyes of the incarnation of mind energy, all the other combat units are retreating quickly, and the metal doors connecting to the base are closed one by one. Want to escape? Looking at the slowly closing metal door in front of him, the incarnation of mind chi flashed and appeared directly in front of the door, then stretched out an arm, and pierced through the alloy door as easily as if it were tofu. Then Li Enping grabbed the hole in the door with both hands, and with a slight force, he tore open the alloy door that weighed several tons. Looking at the mechanical units retreating quickly in the metal passage behind the gate, the incarnation of mind energy shouted directly, and a breath of white gas accompanied by black mind energy shot towards the retreating troops, like a white shock wave. The incarnation of mind energy exhaled violently, directly blasting more than half of the mechanical units in front of him into pieces, turning them into fragments on the ground. On the aircraft carrier, the God King looked at the sudden shock wave and shouted frantically, "There is something that can be invisible attacking the base, Red Queen, scan that position." But then Red Queen tried several methods, but could not detect the existence of the incarnation of mind energy. Whether it was infrared, radar, or thermal imaging, it was difficult to detect the incarnation of mind energy. After all, mind energy can only be seen and felt by those with abilities above level 1. However, Li Enping's current incarnation of mind energy still maintained a physical form, so when Red Queen used sound waves, he was swept out. The target has been found by sound wave detection, and the model is being established. On the screen, countless numbers flowed like a waterfall. Red Queen used countless sound waves to sweep Li Enping's mind incarnation, and then fed back the data obtained, and then established the target model based on these data. Soon, a 2-meter-tall, transparent humanoid creature appeared in front of the God King. "Is this the ghost thing? It must be a capable person," the God King said angrily. "Seal all exits, send the TX-1000, Iron Patriot, Zaku and Thor from the Snow Mountain base." Crush him to death. According to the God King's order, all the exits of the base were sealed by the falling alloy doors. Deep in the base, war machines started up and moved towards the location of the mind incarnation under the control of Red Queen. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 294. In the eyes of the incarnation of mind energy, all mechanical units retreated and dispersed all the way to the depths of the base. Li Anping naturally followed and chased after them. Although he was unwilling to use two powerful tricks to directly destroy the entire base. However, with the combat power of the incarnation of mind energy, he still killed the opponent without any resistance. The armed forces of the entire Snow Mountain base were decreasing at an alarming rate. Suddenly, Li Anping's eyes were empty. He had walked out of the metal corridor and came to an empty hall. The whole hall was like a huge airport, with an area of several square kilometers, and many fighter planes, spacecraft, tanks, and chariots were parked inside. However, these seemed to be unfinished products. Beside them, there were also many engineering brackets, cranes and other machinery parked. It seems that this is the place where large equipment is produced in the Snow Mountain base. However, compared with those unfinished machines, the most eye-catching thing in the hall is the mechanized troops that slowly surrounded Li Anping's position. This army is mainly composed of 4 types of troops. There were more than a dozen human-sized robots flying around in the sky, spurting flames. This kind of robot looked similar to the iron suit that Christine was wearing, but the armor was thicker and they all carried a machine gun on their shoulders. There were 2 types of robots on the ground. One was a giant robot with a green paint job and a body height of more than 10 meters. There were more than 20 of them. There was another type that looked similar to humans, but when Li Anping's mind swept over them, he found that their bodies were made entirely of metal and had nothing to do with humans. There were about 50 of them. In addition to the above 3 types of robots, the more eye-catching one was a giant robot at the back, which was dozens of meters high and looked like a small hill. The robot had 4 250mm mortars on its body. It was also equipped with missiles, machine guns, electromagnetic guns, and other weapons, and it could be described as a mobile fortress. This was the force that the God King sent to deal with Li Anping. It was made up of the Iron Patriot flying in the sky. It looked like a human, but in fact, it was made entirely of liquid metal, the T-1000. There are also huge humanoid machines invented entirely to adapt to war, Zaku, and the ultimate weapon that exists like a war fortress, Thor. Such a powerful and gorgeous fully mechanized ground force, if it is against the army of an ordinary country, then he can be said to be invincible. The technology that is more than 100 years ahead of the entire world is simply not something that the current army can deal with. The God King himself is also convinced of this. If it were not for the creatures like capable people in this world, he believes that with this army, he would be able to dominate the world. Unfortunately, this world has capable people. And this army is now facing capable people, and they may be the strongest capable people in the world today. So Li Anping just shook his right fist, and the fist wind formed by the fist swept all the T-1000s away. In mid-air, he has turned into a pool of liquid metal mud. And the mind energy incarnation himself. He has already rushed towards the Zaku, which is more than 10 meters tall. And as Li Anping took action, all the mechanical units around him also responded at the same time. 20 Zaku robots either drew out beam axes or took out beam assault guns. The Iron Patriots in the sky aimed all the machine guns on their backs at the incarnation of mind energy. The Thor robot at the back had also adjusted the muzzle towards the incarnation of mind energy. The T-1000 liquid metal robots swept into the sky by the fist wind twisted and struggled to deform, trying to attack Li Anping. All these actions were operated by the Red Queen. As an intelligent computer, her reaction was very fast. The calculation was very accurate. But there was one thing he could not change, that is, although the actions of these machines were already extremely fast. When they were facing Li Enping, this was enough to be called a lightning-fast action, which could only be said to be too slow, until they made the above actions. The incarnation of mind energy had already crashed directly into the abdomen of Izuku. Li Enping grabbed the opponent's shell with both hands, and then tore it hard in the upper and lower directions with both hands. The whole Izuku was like a fragile toy. It was directly torn into two halves by Li Enping and fell to the ground. Then Li Enping flashed again, and another palm was printed on another Izuku. The Izuku robot, which was as tall as a building, was hit by the tiny Li Enping, as if it was hit by an invisible giant hammer. The whole mechanical body flew backwards in the air and directly hit the Izuku behind it. Then the remaining momentum did not stop. The two Izuku flew hundreds of meters together and hit the metal wall hard. The fuselage was completely twisted and deformed, accompanied by bursts of electric sparks, and it wanted to stand up but couldn't. At this time, the machines operated by Red Queen finally completed their respective reactions. The machine guns, mortars, and beam guns all shot towards Li Enping's position. But when their guns turned around, Li Enping had already left that position. Li Enping simply placed his palm on the head of Izuku, and then lifted it up with a little force. The entire Izuku, a war robot weighing about 70 or 80 tons, was lifted up by Li Enping, and he threw it towards another Izuku beside him like a weapon. With a loud bang, it was like two buildings collided with each other. In the midst of the earth-shaking sound, the visible air waves spread out in all directions with the collision point as the center, like waves. The Izuku that was hit rolled out and hit the ground. Although the chest of the Izuku that Li Enping was holding was completely deformed and a huge dent appeared, Li Enping still grabbed it and threw it into the air. This was simply lifting a building up and throwing it into the sky. The evil wind blew in the face. Before they got close, the Iron Patriots in the air had been blown away by gusts of wind. If they were controlled by human equipment, they would probably be stunned by this terrifying power. But even if they were machines without emotions, it would not change their fate. With the power of Li Enping's throw, the huge Izuku directly swept away more than a dozen Iron Patriots and crashed into the ceiling with them. Accompanied by a rumbling collision, the Izuku and half of the Iron Patriots were directly squeezed into a pile of scrap metal by the huge force. Looking at the remaining mechanical troops, Li Enping shook his head impatiently, and directly struck out 10 palms through the air. The fierce airflow was like a huge palm. It hit the Izuku and Iron Patriots directly. Ancient System Ability Sumeru Palm. One of the ancient system abilities that Li Enping cultivated in Zindanjiang, relying on powerful strength and control to manipulate airflow, forming a huge palm like Buddha. In Li Enping's hands, because of his own powerful strength, coupled with the void force field and countless experiences of manipulating the atmosphere, this secret martial arts was even more fierce. It was like the Buddha of heaven descending to the world, and it was like Mount Sumi falling from the sky. After the huge palm composed of white airflow and terrifying giant forces was slapped out, the Izukus were either directly blasted into pieces by a palm, or directly flattened by a palm, or half of their bodies were smashed by a palm. As for the Iron Patriots in the sky, facing the huge palm composed of airflow, they were like flies. They were directly flattened on the ceiling. On the contrary, the T-1000s, relying on the power of liquid metal, were almost immune to physical attacks. Even if they were beaten into a puddle of mud by the giant palm, they would reshape themselves after a few seconds and stumble to stand up again. However, how could Li Enping let them delay any longer? He saw the black flash go around the T-1000s. All the liquid metal robots had been caught by Li Enping, and with the compression of the void force field, they were squeezed into a large steel ball with a diameter of more than 2 meters. Then, under the compression of the void force field, the steel ball shrank rapidly until it was grabbed by Li Enping in his palm. He squeezed it hard, and the liquid metal of more than 50 robots gathered together was squeezed into an infinitely small ball by Li Enping's terrifying power. under the terrible internal energy and pressure. The liquid metal was like enjoying the high temperature and high pressure deep in the Earth's core. When Li Anping opened his palm again, all the liquid metal had turned into particles that were difficult to distinguish with the naked eye and dissipated in the air. Looking up, Thor, the robot that looked like a war bunker, was desperately retreating. In the eyes of Red Queen, Li Anping in front of him was already invincible, and he was manipulating Thor to retreat, to avoid more losses. But how could Li Anping let the robot in front of him escape? He sneered, and his figure flashed above Thor's head, but he hadn't made any moves yet. Thor had already launched 4 anti-aircraft missiles, shooting at the incarnation of mind energy in the air at the same time. A huge fireball appeared in the upper air above Thor's head, and the shock wave of the explosion swept across most of the hall. But when the smoke and dust of the explosion slowly dissipated, in the sound wave detection of Red Queen, the figure of the incarnation of mind energy was standing in the distance like a demon god, not only unscathed, but even without moving. Li Anping glanced coldly at Thor at his feet, and with a samurai palm, he had already pressed hard towards the war fortress under his feet with the terrifying power of Mount Tai. In the sight of the God King, the Thor on the screen was like being in an environment with 100 times the gravity. He was directly twisted and deformed by the giant palm composed of white airflow. With a terrible squeak, he was beaten into a discus. The sweat beads as big as beans covered the forehead of the God King. He had never been so scared and terrified. Although he didn't know who the other party was, what he was, or even whether he was a creature. But the overwhelming force displayed by the other party at this moment had completely frightened him. The mechanical troops accumulated for many years were wiped out in an instant, which made anger and fear entangled in his heart at the same time. How could this happen? Why does this world have such a monster? Why would this monster come to me? The pale face of the God King was like a gambler who had lost everything. In fact, after 2 bases were defeated in a row, he was indeed seriously injured. But the next moment, thinking of his own advantages, the God King barely suppressed the fear in his heart. It's okay. Just give me some time. Sooner or later, I will become the strongest. When I come back next time, I will tear all your tendons and bones apart. After saying this viciously, the God King seemed to have vomited out the fear in his heart. But at this moment, the alarm of the aircraft carrier sounded again, and the Red Queen said in an innocent childish voice, "High energy reaction, Master, something is approaching us, and the speed has exceeded Mach 10. Man at the top of the food chain." Author, Xianglang Go. Chapter 295. A few seconds after Red Queen finished her report, a white figure flew towards the location of the aircraft carrier. The person who came was completely wrapped in a thick layer of airflow, making it difficult to see what exactly was flying over. At a speed of Mach 10, the high temperature generated by air friction directly formed a high-temperature vacuum corridor where he passed by, blowing away all the surrounding clouds. The cone-shaped shockwave spread continuously around the person who came with the person as the center. If this flying object was flying in the city, the explosion and shock wave it produced alone would be enough to rupture the eardrums of people in a city and leave corpses everywhere. And now this substance like a white meteor hit the aircraft carrier on the cloud, like a great collision between heaven and earth. Get out of the way, amid the roar of the God King, the alarm of Red Queen, and the scream of Xiao'er, the engine of the aircraft carrier started to run rapidly, blue flames sprayed out, and the entire aircraft carrier turned quickly to the side. But before the God King could catch his breath, as the aircraft carrier turned, the unknown substance moving at high speed also turned. At this time, the distance between the two was only more than 30 kilometers, which means that in more than 10 seconds, the two would collide. It's too late, the God King quickly ordered, "Stop, use all the energy on the plasma shield, and hold him hard." The Red Queen's voice was still unhurried, "Yes, sir." Under her control, the entire aircraft carrier stopped moving, and all the energy was allocated to the plasma shield. The originally colorless and transparent plasma shield was instantly overloaded, and the blue light became brighter and brighter, like a layer of blue light covering the entire aircraft carrier. Just as the God King held his breath and waited, a few seconds passed quickly. The unknown substance hit the plasma shield of the aircraft carrier like a white meteor. With a shocking collision, it was like Mars hitting the Earth. First, the terrifying impact force was transmitted to the plasma shield, and the entire shield flickered for a while, as if it would collapse at any time. Then the sound of the impact spread in all directions. It was a loud noise of more than 190 decibels, a terrifying loud noise that exceeded the eruption of a volcano, and the maximum sound intensity that the atmospheric pressure on this planet can theoretically transmit. And this was just the sonic boom formed by a small part of the energy dissipated by this impact. The next moment, the shaky plasma shield, in this unique impact in the entire human history, was like a soap bubble that was constantly compressed. Finally, it shattered and disappeared completely under the desperate eyes of the God King. With a bang, as the plasma shield completely collapsed, the conical shockwave directly hit the aircraft carrier. The entire aircraft carrier was knocked backwards, and countless large and small dents were left on the surface of the aircraft carrier. Fortunately, as the plasma shield was broken, the unknown substance did not continue to crash down at that terrible speed, but stopped completely, standing quietly in front of the aircraft carrier, coldly watching the violent shockwave hit the aircraft carrier body. Caused a second round of damage. After waiting for the entire aircraft carrier to stabilize again, the God King climbed up from the floor, and he looked at the display nervously. The plasma user was completely defeated, and it will take about 2 hours to recharge. The armor on the surface of the aircraft carrier was damaged by 12%. Engine, weapon system, interceptor, communication system, nothing happened. Before the God King could breathe a sigh of relief, the Red Queen had already called up the monitoring screen. Report: unknown humanoid creatures were found in front of the spacecraft. The God King looked at the monitoring screen called up by the Red Queen, his eyes widened instantly, and saw Li Anping standing in mid-air, with his right fist clenched, as if he would punch the aircraft carrier again at any time and anywhere. Li Anping, the God King screamed, "It's him. What does he want to do?" On the screen, Li Anping put his right fist at his waist. With this action, large areas of airflow were attracted around him. They gathered towards his palm like a black hole, swallowing and spitting out the air around him like crazy. Red Queen reminded, "High energy reaction is found ahead." Damn! How can Li Anping be so strong, thinking of the opponent's attack just now? The God King groaned, "How can he be so strong?" Xiao'er on the side also became nervous, "Master? What should we do? He seems to be attacking again? Doesn't he have a handle in our hands? Why would he attack us?" The God King roared in fear and anger, "How do I know?" But then he ordered Red Queen, "Let me talk to him." "Yes, my master." Li Anping was gathering energy in the air to charge the air bomb. But the purpose of his demonstration was very obvious, which was to give the opponent a chance to surrender. After all, he would rather take over the things in the other party's hands than destroy the aircraft carrier directly. At this moment, a voice came from the aircraft carrier. "Li Anping, what do you want to do?" Hearing the other party's voice, Li Anping was unmoved, and his palms continued to absorb the airflow around him. As the airflow increased, the internal pressure, internal energy, and temperature of the air mass also rose rapidly, and its power became more and more thrilling. The God King said angrily, "Have you forgotten that I have evidence in my hand? Li Anping, if you don't stop, I will expose all the evidence and ruin your reputation." Facing the threat from the God King, Li Anping just said coldly, "Surrender or die." "Ah!" The God King slapped his palm on the console and said angrily, "This lunatic. But looking at the opponent's increasingly higher energy index on the display screen, and seeing the temperature of the air mass in Li Anping's palm getting higher and higher, the God King took the time to say to Xiao'er beside him, "Xiao'er, go and get it. All the materials for the first stage were exposed to me. I wonder if he dares to drive me crazy." He had long expected that the other party might take tough measures, so the God King divided the evidence and materials into 5 stages according to the severity. The first stage was to let the other party know that he was not lying and that he did have a lot of information. But just as the God King looked at Li Anping on the screen and waited anxiously, he turned his head and saw Xiao'er looking at the screen stupidly without making a move. "What's going on? Didn't I ask you to upload information?" Xiao'er said blankly, "Young master, the 8th Research Institute has been found out." "What?" The God King didn't believe it. He pushed Xiao'er away and stared at the computer screen. He kept opening web pages one after another, all of which were news about the 8th Research Institute. Underground human experiments. Exposure. The main suspect Shi Wen has been arrested. Li Anping was furious and personally led the team to investigate. A total of 17 clones were discovered. All involved will be sentenced to death. The latest news, the mysterious queen sponsor of the institute. When the God King saw the last title, he clicked on it directly, then skipped the previous text and kept dragging it down. In the last blank space, a photo of him was pasted directly on it. "Are you kidding?" the God King said angrily. "How can anyone believe this kind of thing?" But it was useless for him to shout again, because in addition to the news from these formal channels, Daxialongke also released a lot of gossip. For example, the 8th Research Institute was studying aliens and stored a flying saucer that arrived 50 years ago. And the bodies of aliens. There were also clone legions, biochemical viruses, electronic life, and other things. Thousands of news that seemed to be true or false were exposed at the same time, sweeping away all the internet channels like a whirlwind. Just when the God King was hesitating whether to upload his evidence again, and how many people would believe it after uploading among the thousands of gossips, a thunderous sound sounded again in the sky outside. Like an explosion. Li Anping shouted, "Surrender or die." One sentence, 5 words, but it was like a giant hammer, hitting the heart of the God King, making him pale. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 296. The God King, or Dobuta, was just an ordinary fisherman's son before he was 14 years old. But on his 14th birthday, something happened that changed his life. He got a memory that did not belong to him. The owner of this memory was named Wankang, who came from a world similar to Dabuto's world. It's just that there are no superpowers there, and the technology is not as advanced as here. However, this person called Wankang doesn't know much about technology, history, society, etc. He is just a technical secondary school student. After graduation, he has been squatting in the internet cafe, never leaving the house, eating instant noodles, breathing second-hand smoke, and dominating the internet all day long. So what he remembers most are still a large number of novels, animations, and games. The 2 games he particularly likes are called StarCraft and Dota. After getting Wankang's memory, Dobuta didn't know whether he was Wankang or Dobuta. But he didn't care, because in addition to this memory, he also had a so-called system in his body. As long as he completes the tasks given by the system in time, he can get survival points. With the survival points, he can get countless high-tech that only exists in Wankang's fantasy. After the 2 consciousnesses merged, whether it was a 14-year-old fisherman or a 16-year-old technical secondary school graduate, there was one thing in common. That is, they were absolutely unwilling to live a muddled life. Now with the system, they became the traversers in Wang Kang's mind, and ambition began to spread in his heart. First of all, the name. The name Dobuta is too earthy. In Wang Kang's memory, his favorite Dota hero is the King of Gods, and he hates the name Dobuta, so he lets others call himself the King of Gods. Then there are all kinds of songs, novels, and animations plagiarized from another world. With these cross-border works, Wang Kang quickly accumulated a lot of wealth. And with this wealth, he completed one task after another assigned by the system. But just when he was full of complacency and thought that the world was in his hands, as his social status gradually improved, he discovered that there were actually capable people in this world, and the strongest among the capable people had the power to change the world pattern. Resentment and jealousy. Hate. Although the God King hates the existence of people with special abilities, he still suppresses himself, hides in the dark, and silently completes tasks while accumulating wealth. Exchange various high-tech from the system. At first, he also doubted whether his system was his ability, but he just couldn't cultivate his mind. But none of this matters. The God King believes that even if there are people with special abilities in this world, as long as he is given enough time to exchange the big killers in the system one by one, he will one day rule the world. By then, the harem, immortality, and countless wealth will be at your fingertips. But just a year ago, the tasks issued by the system gradually began to be related to Daxia, and almost all of them were against Daxia Lonke. Until the most recent time, the task was to save Peter Parker. The God King originally planned to push Tian Hao into the front, but he didn't expect it. Daxia Lonke finally discovered him, and Li Anping's strength was far beyond his imagination. Impossible, I am a time traveler, I should be the protagonist of this world. How could I lose? The God King stared with red eyes, like a gambler who had lost everything. He shouted, "Red Queen! Send all the combat units. I will fight him." "Yes, my master." In Li Anping's eyes, the entire aircraft carrier suddenly changed, as the hatches were opened one by one. Hundreds and thousands of interceptors flew out, like a group of locusts, flying towards Li Anping in the air. The whole sky was covered by countless interceptors in an instant. Thousands of interceptors were like a dark cloud, blocking most of the sun's rays, making the thousands of meters around the aircraft carrier dark. This is the God King's greatest reliance. Relying on numbers alone is enough to overwhelm all resistance interceptor corps. Moreover, the technology content of each of these interceptors is more than 50 years ahead of the human world. It can be said that any of them is comparable to the most advanced fighter jets in the human world. Now, this metal torrent composed of countless interceptors, with Li Anping as the center, completely surrounded him like a whirlpool. "Li Anping, don't force me. I'll give you one last chance. We will each take a step back and keep our distance from each other from now on." Humph! With a cold snort, Li Anping showed a grim smile on his face. He was too lazy to listen to the words of the God King. He saw Li Anping push his right palm, and the air mass in his palm had already shot towards the mechanical army in front of him. The air mass had just left Li Anping's palm and had begun to expand violently, rushing into the depths of the interceptor core with terrifying kinetic energy that was enough to tear everything apart and shatter everything. With a boom, like hundreds of millions of tons of high explosives exploding at the same time, the atmosphere was torn to pieces in an instant, and large numbers of interceptors were deformed and exploded under the terrible shock wave, turning into a ball of fire and falling towards the sea. Once they fell into the sea, the terrible high temperature evaporated a large amount of water vapor. The metal frenzy in the air revealed a huge hole under this explosion, and the shock wave also hit the aircraft carrier that was close at hand, pushing the aircraft carrier back hundreds of meters. With Li Anping's attack, the densely packed interceptors all reacted and aimed their guns at Li Anping in the center. In an instant, thousands of blue high-energy lasers, with thousands of degrees of high temperature, shot towards Li Anping like the light of heavenly punishment. The attack was almost 360 degrees without dead angles, and it was fired at the speed of light. Even Li Anping could hardly dodge these high-energy lasers completely, but Li Anping did not think about dodging, because he did not need to dodge. Li Anping's body at this time was enough to withstand millions of tons of force and could fly at a speed of 10 Mach with ease. His physical strength at this time was really incredible. Moreover, after the transformation of the Hell map, the most powerful part of his body was the unprecedented adaptability, the ability to adapt to all environments. Whether it was ultra-high temperature or ultra-low temperature, Li Anping's body had extremely strong tolerance to it. Li Anping, who had his eyes closed, was covered in countless blue lasers. All the hair on his skin was turned to ashes in an instant, and his skin turned red in an instant. It was like a cooked lobster. But that was all. When the God King excitedly looked at Li Anping, who was hit by countless high-energy lasers, Li Anping, who was at the center of the attack, just felt like he was soaking in warm water, and it was warm and comfortable all around. In this feeling, he even opened his eyes on his own initiative. The laser that was originally shot at the skin directly hit his eyeball. But Li Anping's eyes did not react at all. The dazzling laser was only slightly stronger than the sunlight in front of his eyes, making him a little unable to see the surroundings clearly. The opponent's attack was weaker than he expected, so Li Anping attacked again. He was seen shouting, as if a thunderbolt sounded in the air. A huge white palm flew from bottom to top towards the mechanical ocean in the sky. Sumi palm. The white giant palm carried a force that was enough to overturn the mountains and seas. Thousands of interceptors were knocked out wherever they passed. Every second, hundreds of interceptors were directly blown up and turned into countless parts and fragments falling down. Originally, these endless interceptors were like bees. They wrapped Li Anping layer by layer to form a huge metal sphere, and countless interceptors were crawling on the surface of the sphere. But now, with Li Anping's Sumi palm, a huge hole was directly blasted out on the top of the metal sphere. And then, dozens of huge palms slapped hard in all directions with Li Anping as the center, and the encirclement formed by the entire interceptor was like a rag, which was torn in an instant. Countless interceptors were directly blasted into powder by various powerful palm forces in the space. As Li Anping's offensive ended, the whole sky seemed to be clear. Although the aircraft carrier's assembly line was still producing interceptors, new interceptors could be seen flying out of the aircraft carrier and flying towards Li Anping. But the overall number was only 1 in 10 compared to the beginning. The winner was already very obvious. In the aircraft carrier, the God King sat in a chair with a slumped face, his eyes full of confusion and disbelief. On the other side, Li Anping in mid-air looked at the scattered interceptors around him. He opened his mouth slightly. A white laser-like airflow spit out of his mouth. The violent airflow, like a straight sword of light, swept across the scattered interceptors as Li Anping's neck turned, destroying them all. Then Li Anping jumped lightly, and his feet were already standing on the armored plate of the aircraft carrier. In this short period of time, his hair, eyebrows, and sweat hair that were destroyed by the high-energy laser had grown again. Looking at the huge aircraft carrier under his feet, Li Anping pressed his hands on the armor plate, and then shouted softly, "Go down." The entire aircraft carrier seemed to emit a burst of Shenyin, but even if all the engines of the aircraft carrier were running desperately, they could not resist Li Anping's huge force, and were pushing the aircraft carrier inch by inch towards the sea surface. Warning! Warning! The external armor is seriously damaged. Warning! Warning! The aircraft carrier engine is overloaded. Hearing a series of harsh warnings from the Red Queen, the God King ignored them. He just stared at Li Anping on the screen with his eyes, and then pointed at Li Anping outside the aircraft carrier. Maelstrom. The powerful spiritual energy, like a roaring wave, swept directly into Li Anping's brain. This is a powerful skill that the God King exchanged from the system. It was originally a terrible ability of the Dark Archon, the maelstrom. It can temporarily tear apart the thoughts, memories, and consciousness of creatures with powerful spiritual power, causing the other party to pause. It also belongs to the high-tech exchange category of the system. But the invincible whirlpool also failed this time. Just like a stone thrown into the sea, this powerful mental skill had no effect on Li Enping. But the power exerted by the void force field on the aircraft carrier became stronger and stronger. Although the entire aircraft carrier struggled desperately, it was gradually controlled by Li Enping. He seemed to be planning to carry this aircraft carrier back to Daxia. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 297. After Li Enping used the void field to control the aircraft carrier, he prepared to pack it up and take it directly to Daxia. But at the same time, his mind energy also scanned the entire aircraft carrier, and immediately locked the position of the God King. As soon as I locked it, I felt something was wrong. The bodies of the God King and the woman beside him were wrapped in a layer of blue light, and they were slowly disappearing, as if they were about to be teleported away. Li Enping didn't know that this was the God King's life-saving technology at the bottom of the box, the jump door technology from the Protoss. But just by looking at it, he understood that the God King wanted to escape. Seeing that the leader was about to escape, Li Enping didn't care whether he damaged the aircraft carrier or not. He just roared low, and his whole body was like an indestructible laser, tearing apart layer after layer of armor plates and heading towards the god. The king's position moved forward in a straight line. The alloy is hard enough to sail in space and resist various meteorites, rays, and high-temperature aerospace materials. At this time, it is as ridiculous as a plastic toy in front of Li Enping. With a bang, the God King looked up and saw that a big hole had been knocked out of the ceiling of the control room by Li Enping. A demon-like figure descended directly in front of the God King. Li Enping said coldly, "Stop." At this time, the entire lower body of the God King had completely disappeared in the blue light. When he saw Li Enping, his face changed drastically and he looked anxious. It usually only takes 30 seconds to complete the teleportation jump. At this moment, it seemed that so long. Seeing that although the God King looked panicked, he had no intention of stopping, Li Enping frowned and punched Xiao'er with his right hand through the air. With one punch, this pretty girl with short red hair didn't even react. She was directly blown into pieces by the violent airflow. Part of her upper body that exploded was even splashed on the God King. His face turned pale. It's been smooth sailing. The God King, who had never encountered setbacks, was immediately crushed by the cruelty Li Enping brought to him. Seeing the girl he loved being bombarded to pieces, the first thing that appeared in his heart was not hatred, but fear. An instinctive fear of death. At this moment, what ambition, harem. The whole world has disappeared in his mind. At this moment, all these things combined are not as important as his own life. Seeing Li Enping clenching his fists again, the God King quickly shouted loudly, "Red Queen, stop jumping." "As you command, my master." In the Red Queen's voice of agreement, the blue light gradually dissipated. The lower body of the God King appears again in the aircraft carrier. He looked at the cold-faced Li Enping in front of him and said immediately, "Li Enping, please don't kill me. You can arrest me, and I will never resist. I can tell you all kinds of knowledge that transcends this era. I can also help you develop space-saving nuclear fusion and collapse cannons. Invent endless high technologies." Li Enping narrowed his eyes and said calmly, "I didn't plan to kill you casually, but your previous personality seemed to be self-centered. Now that I have killed 2 of your women, you are willing to join me?" The God King carefully concealed the resentment and anger in his heart, and said with a sincere face, "That's because I didn't know the heights of the sky before, but now I know that you are the protagonist of this world. I can just follow you. Doesn't the current nuclear binding of the Western continent make it impossible for you to take action against them? I have a way to help you solve this problem. I will tell you about various technologies that are far ahead of this era. With my help, you will soon be able to unify the world. Really, Li Enping was non-committal and just asked calmly, then where did the high technology in your mind come from? These airships, robots, and the war weapons in your branch base. Were they all invented by you? Hearing Li Enping ask this question, a trace of hesitation flashed in the God King's eyes, but at the moment he hesitated, a high-energy laser from the corner directly penetrated his chest. The God King looked at the big hole in his chest in disbelief. He murmured, "The Red Queen." Li Enping snorted and punched away the laser transmitter on the wall. Looking down at the God King, he saw that the other person's breathing had gradually disappeared and his blood had begun to gradually cool down. There was only endless resentment in the God King's eyes. He shouted in his heart, "Why is Li Enping so strong? Why did the Red Queen betray me? I should be the master of this world, why? Why do I have technology beyond this era, but I still lose to you natives? The Red Queen has clearly recognized me as her master, why would she betray me? I am so unwilling. I was supposed to do great things. Why did you die here? I'm so cruel. I'm so cruel." In the endless resentment, the God King's eyes gradually became dull, and all signs of life disappeared from his body. Li Enping shook his head, not expecting the God King to die like this. If it had been another attack just now, he would have been able to stop it, but as long as something like a laser was launched, it would reach the speed of light and he couldn't stop it. Thinking of what the God King said just now and the Red Queen's answer of obeying the order, Li Enping frowned and thought, is the Red Queen he just said the intelligent system of this spacecraft? This system has been invaded by others. Still. Thinking of this, Li Enping shouted, "Red Queen. Is this the God King you killed?" There was no answer. Not only was there no answer, but the Red Queen seemed to have completely disappeared and abandoned the control of the aircraft carrier. The engines of the entire aircraft carrier began to shut down, the power began to shut down, and all kinds of automated weapons and mechanical units were disconnected. The entire aircraft carrier fell into silence. If it weren't for Li Enping's void force field, the aircraft carrier would have fallen into the sea. Seeing this, Li Enping had a vague bad idea in his heart. Could it be that this so-called Red Queen really rebelled? Did he shut himself down, or did he upload himself to somewhere else? There were too few clues, and Li Enping couldn't judge the situation. After thinking about it, he gave up the idea of transporting the aircraft carrier back immediately, and instead controlled the aircraft carrier to slowly land on the nearest uninhabited island. Then he dived at high speed to the underwater base where the God King had retreated before. Unfortunately, he searched the entire underwater base, but like the aircraft carrier, all the machines, power supplies, and networks had been shut down, and he couldn't find any clues. There was no other way. Li Enping could only transport the aircraft carrier back first, and the rest would depend on the staff of Daxia to take over. He hoped that they could absorb enough scientific and technological information from the aircraft carrier, the Snow Mountain base, and the submarine base, and find clues related to the Red Queen. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 298. 4 weeks later, Zhongdu International Airport. As one of the few airports in Daxia with overseas flights, it is always crowded with people. In the waiting room, a man who looked big and strong with a full beard sat on a chair. He seemed a little uneasy and kept touching his cheek subconsciously. Next to him was a young woman with long hair and a professional suit. However, the young woman's eyes were full of indifference, just like an iceberg that had been silent for tens of thousands of years. Seeing the man beside him touching his face again, the woman said coldly, "Don't touch your face anymore, you just had plastic surgery, no one will recognize you." The man put down his hand and smiled awkwardly, "I'm not used to it, I'm just not used to it." Speaking of which, Miss Dong-er, where are we going now? The woman called Dong-er said indifferently, don't ask too much, you will know when you see the young master. The man with the changed appearance and the iceberg beauty beside him were Dong-er and Tianhaoan, who were sent by the God King to capture Tianhaoan. But Tianhaoan didn't know why he had plastic surgery and his appearance changed greatly. Tianhaoan looked at Dong-er, then at another indifferent man beside him, and his heart was full of fear. It was this cold-faced man who found his location directly, and with his immortal body like liquid metal, he suppressed Tianhaoan to death. Although Tianhaoan's soul was not afraid of death after leaving his body was extremely fragile when someone approached him. So Tianhaoan was taken away half hostage and forced to undergo plastic surgery. And the behavior of Dong-er and the man next to him also made Tianhaoan very confused. Tianhaoan had met Dong-er before. She was a lively, cheerful, smart, and capable woman, but this time, she was like an iceberg. Unless necessary, she would not say a word. No matter what happened, her expression did not change, which gave Tianhaoan a creepy feeling. What made him feel even more strange was the other party's itinerary. After finding him, the other party did not take him to the God King immediately. Instead, he went around Daxia, starting from the Emerald City, all the way north, and came to Zhongdu. Now he plans to take a plane to Tyrell. Just when Tianhaoan was thinking about this in his mind, the TV in the waiting room suddenly attracted his attention. The human experiment case has come to an end. Mastermind Shi Wen, Xiaolu, Osborne. Execute by firing squad. Seeing the news about the 8th Research Institute, Tianhaoan exhaled deeply. Li Enping's courage, execution, and his control over the entire Daxia government all made him secretly shocked. Just then, Dong-er stood up and said coldly, let's go. Our plane has arrived. New Dongyang, West District 69. Shi Wen stood on a high ground, looking down, with a flash of excitement. A new research institute will be built here, which is not only larger and more complex than the original 8th Research Institute, but also the digestion and analysis of the technology obtained from the God King, from aircraft carriers to the body of the God King. All will be carried out here. On the plane, I saw that the terrible monsters were being built according to the engineering drawings under the command of Takuchi Kingta. They were either manipulating earth and stone, or were extremely powerful, or melting gold and boiling iron. Their efficiency was countless times faster than that of ordinary engineering teams. Shi Wen estimated that the new research institute would be completed within 2 months. It will be a huge underground facility with 49 floors, and it will be responsible for research on biology, machinery, and other aspects. However, according to Li Enping's arrangement, cloned people with abilities, artificial intelligence, and monster cells, that is, gray cells, will be the 3 major focuses of the new institute. The doctor on the side kept operating the tablet in his hand, and joked, don't you want to read your own news? You are going to be shot. Shi Wen said impatiently, how long are you going to make this joke? It's just a clone. The doctor smiled, oh? Clone. How do you know that he is a clone and you are the original? It's not that the dead one is the original, and you are copied and continue to study. Shi Wen was stunned, and when he was about to refute, he found that the doctor laughed and walked away. This lunatic. Just after the doctor left, a big black hole suddenly appeared in front of Shi Wen, and Emma slowly got out of it. She still had a ponytail and wore a sportswear like a school uniform, giving people a feeling of youth and invincibility. The only difference was that she was carrying a long object wrapped in layers of cloth on her back. She saw Shi Wen in front of her and greeted him, hi. Shi Wen nodded and said respectfully, Master Emma, do you have anything to do? Emma also helped a lot in the relocation of the 8th Research Institute after returning from the moon. It was she who opened a portal from West 69 District to Tianjing, which greatly accelerated the relocation work. She also made great efforts in the relocation of the submarine base and the Snow Mountain base. Nothing, Emma said helplessly. Did you see Li Enping? She pointed to her back. I have been carrying this thing for almost 2 weeks. When will he come out? I can give it back to him. She thought for a moment and said uncertainly, it seems that something happened to Lord Baizeng. After the two of them went to East District 54, they never contacted us again. But they should be back soon, right? Emma looked at Shi Wen's uncertainty and sighed helplessly. Li Enping said that the adamantium sword on her back was very important and asked her to bring it to her incarnation. But after she came to Xindanjiang, Li Enping's mind incarnation disappeared with Baizeng, and she had to help with the construction of the research institute here, so she could only keep the sword every day. Yes, because Li Enping's mind incarnation had been used many times, he simply half-opened it to some of his subordinates. However, Li Enping did not tell them the specific abilities of the mind incarnation. At this moment, Emma's communicator rang, and she said directly, I know, I'm here. The next moment, Emma stepped into a dark portal, and then her eyes lit up, and she had arrived at the construction site. Takuchi Aoda pointed at the engineering drawing and gestured to Emma while saying something. A few minutes later, a black circular portal with a diameter of about 200 meters appeared above the construction site like a pancake. A portal of the same size appeared a few kilometers away. The portal above the construction site fell directly down. As the portal fell, the earth seemed to have a hole opened directly. All the soil, stones, and plants that touched the portal were all teleported a few kilometers away. As the portal continued to sink, a huge hole was formed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Emma's digging of the hole in this way is much faster than any modern technology. In a blink of an eye, a day passed, and the entire construction site looked like it was in good shape. With the help of 2 level 5 ability users, Emma and the doctor, and countless monsters of different sizes and abilities, the construction speed here is probably equivalent to 1 or 2 months in other places in one day. That night, Emma received another message from Li Enping. She was asked to use the ability of the Space Gate to prepare a long sword that cuts the adamantium alloy, and a sample drawing was sent. But of course, she was not asked to start working immediately. Instead, she was asked to practice more according to the style in the drawing. After all, Daxia only had this adamantium alloy long sword. And there are definitely no more than 5 people in the world who can perfectly cut adamantium alloy, and Emma's Space Gate is one of them. But Emma has not specially trained this kind of meticulous skills. Her portal, if used for cutting, is used to directly chop people, and has not been used to process things like swords. So more practice is needed. While the construction site of the new site of the Institute was in full swing, East District 54, hundreds of kilometers away from West District 69. All animals or monsters within a radius of several kilometers have disappeared. A black thought energy, like a smoke screen, rose from the ground and rushed straight up to a height of several thousand meters. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 299. I saw the incarnation of pure black thought energy, holding the ten-fist sword in his hand. The black thought energy kept moving in and out of the sword master, and the sword body of the ten-fist sword kept emitting waves of strange light. Waves of ominous aura emerged from Li Enping and the ten-fist sword. Bai Xing kept telling Li Enping the results of thousands of experiments he had done during this period. Countless data flashed through Li Enping's mind, and finally transformed into formulas. Looking at the ten-fist sword in his hand, he slowly withdrew his mind energy and ended the scanning of the ten-fist sword. Li Enping nodded. It should be similar to what we guessed. The next step is to wait for Emma to make the model, and then we can make a new ten-fist sword, and then we will know the result. Bai Xing asked doubtfully, isn't it too wasteful to use Edelman alloy as the material for the first time? It doesn't matter, I designed two in total, a long sword and a sword made of cut materials, Li Anping explained, and with our method, except for Edelman alloy, ordinary the materials probably won't be able to handle it, and we can only produce semi-finished products. Bai Xing nodded and began to discuss martial arts again. During this period, plus the last time Li Anping came to the main body, these two may be the experts with the deepest understanding of ancient system abilities in the world, and they have never given up on the unification of all esoteric martial arts. After knowing that it is impossible to forcibly unify all ancient system abilities, the two of them turned their attention to another matter, which was to find ways to create several esoteric martial arts that were powerful, quick-acting, and capable of combining most similar ancient abilities. In terms of functions, they are mainly concentrated in the protection type, release type, melee type, speed type, and concealment type. Li Anping was responsible for organizing and analyzing data from various sects, while Bai Xing relied on his own experience. Various constructive experiences were given, and then Li Anping continued to test them with his immortality. In this way, besides analyzing the 10 fist swords, they probably created the framework of two secret martial arts, one of which is the protection type and the other is the speed type. Among them, the body protection type is called body protection gangliu, which is combined with modern technology. In addition, it combines dozens of esoteric martial arts such as the golden bell cover, iron cloth shirt, Vajra indestructible magic, immortal dharma, great sun rebirth and other secret martial arts, which not only provides quick results. It is powerful, and its defensive power is completely comparable to those who can turn themselves into metal people. The speed type is named Qi manipulation by Li Anping, which is based on the manipulation of airflow, combined with the explosion of one's own muscle strength and thought energy, to achieve the effect of high-speed movement. In this regard, Li Anping himself is already an expert among experts. Combined with the experience of secret martial arts, this Qi manipulation technique takes the least time for two people and has the most satisfactory effect. If Li Anping and Bai Xing cannot guarantee that they will be able to practice to the 5th level in the body protection gangliu, then Li Anping can confirm that it is possible to practice to the 5th level in the Qi manipulation technique. The key is to persevere. What's more, this is only the first version of the Qi manipulation technique. Li Anping and Bai Xing will continue to modify it to make it even better. And in terms of cultivation qualifications, this is an issue that he and Bai Xing have specially considered. Otherwise, what is the difference between this set of secrets and the others? It makes no sense for them to create these martial arts. Therefore, whether it is body protecting ganglia or Qi manipulation, the qualification requirements are extremely low. The most important thing is unremitting persistence and hard work. Bai Xing suddenly asked, how do you plan to promote these secret martial arts? These martial arts can allow ordinary people to have power comparable to those with abilities. If they are promoted at will. Li Anping said confidently, if I even hesitate to do this, how can I change the world? Even if everyone in Daxia now becomes ability users. I'm also confident I have them in my hands. After a pause, Li Anping continued, my plan is that these secret martial arts will first become Academy City's entrance textbooks. As for ordinary people, I plan to hold a martial arts competition first to increase my influence. Li Anping knew deeply that esoteric martial arts had existed since ancient times, but why were so few people practicing it? Qualification is one aspect, and the other aspect is that combat ability is really not used in daily life for most people, so government promotion alone is not enough. So Li Anping plans to hold a worldwide martial arts competition, and anyone can sign up to participate. As for the reward for first place, he will personally teach a secret martial arts. A martial arts conference, Bai Xing nodded and said, if the government cooperates with the propaganda, it will indeed have great influence. there will be a large number of people practicing martial arts all over the world. However, in this conference, people with abilities can also sign up. Of course, I plan to divide them into the ability group and the inability group, Li Enping said. The first place in both groups will get a secret martial art taught by me personally. Bai Xing laughed. Is this a worldwide martial arts event? It's really exciting. Bai Xing can imagine that when this martial arts competition comes to a successful conclusion, leaving aside the Western continent, there may be people on the Eastern continent. Countless young people began to practice secret martial arts. That strength, Li Enping is selecting some secrets to pass on countless times. In a few years, he will have countless strong men in his hands. While the incarnation of Nian Qi was discussing with Bai Xing, Li Enping's real body was attending a meeting in Tianjing. The content of the meeting was exactly about this year's Great Xia Emperor election. In addition to the heads and representatives of the 9 royal families, there are also several senior officials, generals, etc. of the Daxia government. It can be said that these people are currently assisting Li Enping and ruling the entire empire. As for the content of this emperor's election, although everyone here knows that Li Enping will definitely ascend the throne as king, they still have to make their intentions and appearances, and they still have to go through the selection process as in the past. Although no one thinks that the remaining candidates can defeat Li Enping. On the conference table, Li Enping held a stack of documents in his hand, which contained a plan for the arrangement of the imperial election. Although all the clan leaders have already seen it, they have no meaning to this arrangement. But when the plan was handed over to Li Enping, the entire conference city fell silent instantly, and everyone was quietly waiting for Li Enping's reply. In the huge conference room, the only sound that could be heard was Li Enping turning pages. Beside Li Enping, the head of the Li family, Li Weiwei, looked at her with concern, as if he was in a trance. Since Li Enping dominated the entire Great Xia, the Li family, as the first family among the 9 royal families in Great Xia, to take refuge with Li Enping, immediately gained the merit of following the dragon, and their net worth increased hundreds of times. In just 1 or 2 years, it has become a family second only to the Wang family. Even the Wang family is unwilling to confront the Li family head-on most of the time. But precisely because of this, Li Weiwei knew that the entire future of the Li family was based on Li Enping. So no matter what he does, he, including the Li family, will always follow Li Enping's ideas. He can be regarded as Li Enping's most die-hard supporter in the political situation of Daxia. At this moment, Li Enping put down the document in his hand. Song Qiuzhong, the head of the Song family, said with a flattering smile, "Sir, are you dissatisfied with anything? If so, we will have someone correct it immediately." Wang Chong on the side was disdainful. The Song family had greatly offended Li Enping because of Song Bang's relationship. Although Li Enping has not dealt with the Song family much since he took office. But just because he subconsciously alienated the Song family from the 8 royal families, it has caused huge losses to the Song family in the past year or so. And Song Qiuzhong, who was originally strongly opposed to Li Enping, has become like this now. He is always trying to flatter Li Enping, but from the outside, he is the most obedient to Li Enping. But probably no one knows what he was thinking. Li Enping glanced at Song Qiuzhong and did not reply to his words. Instead, he said directly, "Cancel the imperial election. Since I will become the king of Daxia, there is no need for the so-called imperial election." But Wang Chong frowned and wanted to dissuade him, but was blocked by Li Enping with his hand. "Next, Wang Chong will directly pass the throne to me. It is up to you to confirm the specific ceremony and arrangements." Wang Chong wanted to persuade him again, but was directly pushed down by Xiao Anran beside him. He looked back and found that Xiao Anran was shaking his head at him. After looking around, all the clan leaders and ministers were like clay statues, showing no objection to Li Enping's words. This is the current situation in Daxia, and the entire court has become Li Enping's one-note speech. Usually they can put forward opinions, but once Li Enping decides something, the only thing they can do is to do it as well as possible. Thinking that this situation had never happened when he was in power, Wang Chong sighed in his heart and accepted the order. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 300. 2 months later, Free City, Amist Federation. As one of the most prosperous cities in Amist Federation, it is the most populous city in the entire Western continent. It is also the most diverse city. It has people and immigrants from more than 70 countries, and more than 500 languages are used here. It has the most developed subway network in the world, providing 24-hour uninterrupted service. As one of the economic, cultural, financial, and political centers of the entire Western continent, this world-class city has a great influence. It was once known as the center of the entire world. However, no matter how prosperous a place is, there will be dark corners. In the suburbs of Free City, in a huge warehouse, countless spectators roared excitedly. In their center, there is a cage surrounded by barbed wire. In the cage, 2 strong white men are fighting to the death. Underground black boxing, fighters from all over the world gather here. Most of them participate in fights for money. Among them, those who are lucky can gradually become famous, and even be invited to regular fighting events, earn enough money, and finally retire safely. But most people with bad luck can only disappear from the stage with injuries and meager appearance fees. As the audience roared, the fight on the field became more intense. A boxer was suddenly hit on the forehead by a punch, followed by a violent attack. When he fainted on the ground, he had completely lost consciousness. After the 10-second countdown, the referee raised the winner's hand. It was a white man who was more than 2 meters tall, with marble-like muscles, a beast-like face, and a roaring lion tattooed on his back. When the referee raised his arm to announce the victory, the audience shouted, "Lion King! Lion King! Lion King!" In the lounge, the black boxing player nicknamed Lion King was untying the bandage on his hand little by little. At this time, a black man walked into the lounge with a laugh. "Hey! Jason, we won again, this is your appearance fee," as he said, the black man handed a stack of money to Jason. Jason just accepted it silently without saying much. But the black man didn't care. He had long been accustomed to Jason's indifference. As long as the other party could fight and help him make money, he didn't care about the other party's character problems. The black man patted the muscles on Jason's back and said with a smile, "Jason, my brother, you must have never thought about what happened. I have good news for you. MMA invited us. Ha ha ha, I have booked a flight for you tonight, you should prepare well. Fighting a match there, the appearance fee alone is 100,000. As he spoke, he patted the muscles on Jason's arm, his face full of excitement. But Jason sighed when he heard the news. He said lightly, "Sorry, I'm afraid I can't participate in MMA." "What?" The black man looked at Jason in confusion, "Are you kidding? That's MMA. Even if you lose, you can get 20,000 per game, my brother. Besides, you are sure to win." Jason replied indifferently, "I have booked a flight ticket for this weekend. I'm going to Daxia. Today is probably my last game." "Are you kidding?" The black man looked at Jason in disbelief, and suddenly screamed, "Damn it, are you really going to participate in that fighting competition? The world's first unlimited fighting competition. I want to go and see." Jason's face showed a trace of longing. The black man cursed and shouted, "Are you stupid? Do you really believe in those magic and witchcraft things? I heard that people in Daxia don't even have toilets. Maybe you will be infected with some virus and die as soon as you get off the plane. It's a superpower. Not witchcraft." Jason didn't explain too much. In this era, the Western continent, especially the people of the three major powers, have a natural sense of superiority over the Eastern world. Whether in official propaganda or in their own impressions, the East is always a poor and backward country. The rumors of superpowers some time ago are also a sign of their superstition and feudalism. Looking at the black man who was still complaining, Jason shook his head, put away his backpack, and walked out of the lounge. He also didn't know what the East and Daxia were like. He was not sure whether superpowers existed or not. But anyway, he wanted to give it a try. Just to gain more powerful power, to gain power to dominate his own destiny. The feeling that every cell in the body is pursuing power is something that ordinary people cannot understand. Tianjin, Airport. In the sea of people, a 14 or 15-year-old boy was looking around intently, whether it was the endless flow of people, the majestic airport hall, or all kinds of unprecedented advanced facilities, which he had never seen in his hometown. Behind the boy was a thin middle-aged man who looked a little malnourished. The man touched the boy's head and said happily, "How is Zilan? How is Tianjin? There are many better masters than ours. But there are many powerful guys." The boy's eyes revealed a trace of curiosity and excitement, and kept wandering around some black and white people. These guys looked strong and powerful, and their eyes were full of indifference and vigilance. The young Zilan said with some excitement and some worry, "Are they all participating in the unlimited fighting competition?" "I don't think so," the middle-aged man said, "we are the ones who came earlier. Next week is Li Anping's coronation ceremony. The fighting competition will be held in 2 weeks at this point." The middle-aged man sniffed his nose and said, "These guys have a strong smell of blood on their bodies. I'm afraid they are here for the coronation ceremony." Zilan nodded as if he understood, and suddenly asked, "Then master, can we go to watch the ceremony?" "Of course not," a young man in a suit and glasses ran over from behind. When he heard what Zilan said, he immediately refused and said, "Be careful, this is Daxia, don't talk nonsense, and lose the dignity of our star." This is the diplomat of Star who accompanied Zilan and his master. As a small inland country in the southernmost part of the East continent, Star may be the poorest among the countries in southern Xinjiang. The emperor of their generation is a person who admires masters and worships the strong. Unfortunately, the country of Star is small and weak, with few masters. The strongest ones are only 2 4th-level ability users. After hearing about the unlimited fighting competition that Li Anping was going to hold, he insisted on holding one in his own country, and then sent the champions to participate in the competition in Daxia and win a good ranking. Obviously, Zilan and his master were sent out under such circumstances. The diplomat kept nagging at them, "Remember, when you meet people from Daxia who come to pick you up, don't say anything, just leave everything to me. Also, don't use your abilities indiscriminately. This is Daxia. Don't cause trouble for me and create diplomatic disputes. Also, be careful not to look around all the time, as if you have never seen the world. Remember, respect the customs and traditions of other countries, and don't interfere in their internal affairs." These have been repeatedly emphasized before boarding the plane. Although Zilan and his master did not refute, they looked absent-minded, and it was unknown how much they heard. However, they have been repeatedly taught that they cannot use their abilities casually. Since Li Anping made the existence of people with special abilities public, everyone in Daxia knows that there are superpowers in this world. The management of superpowers is also stricter than before. It can be said that all local superpowers in Daxia are strictly monitored. However, after being more strictly controlled than before, they also received more benefits. First of all people with special abilities will participate in training. The best talents will be assigned to the legendary Academy City supervised by Li Anping himself to receive the most elite education. After graduation, they will directly join the Dragon Bird of Daxia. When they are studying, they will receive subsidies of more than 100,000 yuan per month. The remaining people with special abilities will be assigned to join some schools for people with special abilities run by the 9 royal families according to their talents, qualifications, and various exams. After graduation, they will either join the police or join violent agencies such as the army. Of course, some who are completely unsuitable for combat will be selected into civilian positions. It can be said that since last year, all local people with special abilities in Daxia either belong to the government or are imprisoned. If you are a little bit unwilling to work for the government, then I'm sorry. The government will give you a generous subsidy and benefits, but you will be under the government's supervision for your whole life. If you go abroad or go to other places, you must report it in advance. Of course, Zilan guessed that there must be some hidden ability users in Daxia, but as long as the ability users break through to the first energy level, they will have the spirit. Unless you stay at level 0 for your whole life, it is only a matter of time before you are exposed. At this time, an official from Daxia came to them holding a sign to pick them up at the airport. When the diplomat saw it, he immediately greeted him with a smile on his face and happily talked to him. Although Zilan had learned a little Daxia language beforehand, Star was close to Bayu, and the official language has always been Bayu language, so he didn't understand what the two said. Only the diplomat, who was usually arrogant, nodded and bowed at this time, chatted for a few words, and then followed the other party. He turned around and shouted, "You two, hurry up and catch up. Remember, after checking into the hotel, don't run around casually, and remember to report anything." As for the competition, he didn't mention it. The 2 people in front of him might be top masters in Star, but in a big country like Daxia, there are so many masters that he didn't expect Zilan and his team to win. Zilan shrugged and didn't take it to heart. He glanced aside again, and at some point, some staff in blue and white uniforms appeared around him. Seeing the other party's uniform, Zilan heard the master beside him muttering, "People from Daxia Dragon Bird."